Could you all please rise for the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of Perth, Mr Basil Zemplus.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Can I officially welcome you and declare the City of Perth September 2022 agenda briefing session officially open at exactly 5 p.m. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people of Western Australia. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It is a privilege to be standing on Whadjuk Noongar country. CEO, can I ask you to recite the prayer, please?
Almighty God, under whose providence we hold responsibility for this city, grant us wisdom to understand its present needs, foresight to anticipate its future growth, and grace to serve our fellow citizens with integrity and selfless devotion. And to thee be all blessing and glory forever. Amen.
Thank you very much. Please be seated, everybody. And now, for everybody's benefit, can I again note that in accordance with Council Policy 1.4, this meeting is being live streamed and the recording will be made available on the City's website following the meeting. Can I also acknowledge that due to a link in the Lord Mayor's chain not fastening correctly, the Lord Mayor has gone without the Lord Mayor's chain for tonight's agenda briefing session. But rest assured, for those sticklers for the rules, the Lord Mayor's chain is here. I'm sure we were going to get a question, probably from Councillor Fleet, and I've answered the question for you. Thank you, Councillor. Let's go through our apologies and leave of absence. That is item 3, attendance. And in attendance today are as follows, in alphabetical order: Councillor Clyde Bevan, Councillor Brent Fleeton, Councillor Liam Gobbett, Councillor Rebecca Gordon, unlucky there, Councillor, just missing out alphabetically, Councillor Victor Coe and Councillor Catherine Leeser. In addition, I welcome the Chief Executive Officer, other officers and any members of the public or media in attendance. Deputy Lord Mayor Di Bain and Councillor Sandy Angie are both on an approved leave of absence, and I'll remind councillors to please submit any applications for a leave of absence prior to next week's ordinary council meeting. We move now to item 4, which is the Lord Mayor's announcements. Typically, those following the set pattern of these meetings will know that I save my best work for the ordinary council meeting proper, but it is appropriate with Her Majesty, Her late Majesty, still over our shoulder, and for those wondering, that is in keeping with protocol. There is not an immediate changeover period. But yesterday, along with Councillor Fleeton and Councillor Leeser, we had the opportunity to represent the people of the City of Perth at a memorial service across the road at St George's Cathedral. It was a wonderful service attended by the current Governor and 4 former governors of Western Australia and Sir William Heseltine, who used to be the Principal Private Secretary to the Queen for 4 years, who now lives here in Perth. It was a dignified service and it was a great pleasure to represent the people of the City of Perth, as I mentioned. I want to acknowledge also the contribution of the staff of the City of Perth for moving swiftly to capture the mood of the moment. Now, that included, obviously, working with Government House next door, where the condolence book was being signed by members of the public, and making the necessary arrangements to assist to facilitate that process and make it as easy as possible. Also, obviously, the turning of the council building lights in the royal purple, which was obviously fitting given the period of mourning that we were experiencing. And I want to thank you, Michelle Reynolds, CEO, and all of your staff members for being so adept at handling the situation that was presented to us. And finally, I want to acknowledge that all of the flags flew at half-mast in keeping with protocols and procedures, not only here at Council House, but also on the other recognised council landmarks where flags are flown. That includes, which was news to me, the very large flagpole at the Causeway interchange, which is on this side of the city. That is a council flag. I was always under the impression that it was a main roads flag. It's a council flag. Also down at the Vusto Memorial, council flags flew at half-mast, and at the town hall. Some of the banners which had Australian flags on them, they're not able to be flown at half-mast, and the city staff moved very swiftly to have those removed, because it's either fly or remove. There is no in between. So again, to all of the people and all of our staff at the city for capturing the mood of the moment and reflecting it so appropriately, on behalf of everybody, I want to say thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, disclosures of interest. CEO, have any disclosures been received?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Councillor Leeser has disclosed a proximity interest in relation to items 11.2 and 12.1, as her apartment is directly in the proposed flight plan and also across the road from the Perth Concert Hall, a proposed venue.
Okay. Yeah.
And Councillor Gobbett has disclosed an impartiality interest in relation to item 12.1, as he has attended the program launch for Perth International Arts Festival.
Councillor Leeser.
I'm sorry if that's my mistake, but it should have been 11.1.
Okay.
CEO, I apologise if I wrote the wrong number on there.
Thank you. Apology accepted, Councillor Leeser. Well, it's not my apology to accept, but is that okay if I accept that apology on your behalf? Thank you. That apparently is okay, and apology accepted. Thank you, Councillor Leeser. Let's go then with nothing further. CEO, thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest from the floor? Okay, well, let's go to item 6 and item 6.1, public questions. Public question time will be held at the ordinary council meeting next week. Item 6.2 is deputation. CEO, do we have any deputations tonight?
Yes, Lord Mayor, we have received 2 deputations in relation to items 11.1 and 12.1.
Thank you, CEO. So can I just remind those who are giving deputations tonight, there is a 5-minute limit for deputations. You'll get a warning at 4 minutes. You'll get a ruder warning at 5 minutes. I'm going to invite Mr. Lewis Sugar, have I pronounced that correctly? What a great surname. And Mr. Stephen Dungy, have I pronounced that correctly? Dungy. Mr. Stephen Dungy, who are speaking for the officer's recommendation in item 11.1, to please come forward. Thank you. If I could ask you to state your name and address, and then away you go. If you'd like to join at the lectern, you're most welcome to, but it's a combined 5 minutes, if that's appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Lewis Sugar and I'm associate at Element. Our address is level 18191 St George's Terrace, Perth. So good evening and thank you for the opportunity to present tonight in support of this request to amend the City of Perth City Planning Scheme number 2 and Local Planning Scheme number 26 as it relates to protecting essential helicopter flight paths associated with the emergency helicopter operations at the Royal Perth Hospital and State Medical Trauma Unit. Firstly, I would like to thank the City of Perth for its ongoing support and assistance provided on this project over the past few years. Following the approval and construction of an upgraded helipad at RPH, Element have worked closely with East Metropolitan Health Service, the City of Perth and a number of other key stakeholders in preparing and submitting this scheme amendment request to ensure it achieves the most beneficial outcome for the hospital and landowners within the city. The flight paths proposed to be protected through this scheme amendment have been carefully considered, with the alignment specifically looking to ensure all relevant aviation safety requirements are met, limit the impact of land holdings by taking advantage of major road and rail reservations and utilising the Swan River for a large proportion of the flight path area. Considering the existing planning framework to limit the impact on development potential and to limit the impact on areas of land that are of strategic importance to the state, the City of Perth, Vincent and Development WA. Without protection, ongoing development within the city may impact the safety of operations into the future, especially where a helicopter is required to fly with one engine inoperable. This may ultimately lead to the helicopter helipad, being decommissioned, which in turn impacts on the ability to treat patients that are in need of critical care. Stephen Dungy is the Director of State Trauma Service across WA, and will now touch on the importance of protecting those flight paths as it relates to critical care of patients requiring the service. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Stephen Dungy. I'm a Professor of Emergency Medicine and I'm based at the Royal Perth Hospital, Wellington Street, Perth. In the 1970s, a trauma surgeon called R. Adams Crowley, based in Baltimore, Maryland, recognised that some patients who survived major traumatic injury and made it alive to hospital had limited time to have their injuries diagnosed and treated. For some of them, failure to fully utilise what he called the golden hour of trauma ultimately led to their death. In trauma medicine, minutes can literally mean the difference between living and dying. The other big innovation of that era came about from the recognition that not all hospitals were equipped to provide the best care for critically unwell trauma patients, and that there needed to be suitably resourced hospitals that made these patients core business. Such hospitals needed to be able to provide specialist trauma surgeons 24/7, access to theatres, blood bank, laboratories, and supported by suitably trained specialists in emergency medicine, anaesthetics, radiology and intensive care. They also needed to have rehabilitation services and clinics of the highest order. In this state, the State Trauma Unit is based at the Royal Perth. Like virtually every trauma unit in the world, a city centre location makes sense because that is the way traffic flows. Other hospitals in the state still see major trauma cases, but most cases flow to RPH, with hospitals like Fiona Stanley or Charles Gardner typically seeing 60 to 70 major trauma cases a year. The RPH sees 11 to 1,200 major trauma cases a year. It is the second busiest trauma unit in Australia and provides world-class care with world-class outcomes. Each year, hundreds of our patients arrive by chopper, and the majority of these are classified as being major trauma. Some are so ill that they arrive with CPR in progress and are taken straight to operating theatre to give them the best chance of survival. The new helipad at Royal Perth has recently been opened and is developed at the cost of millions of dollars to enable the new generation of choppers to land. They are bigger, faster, with more capacity and greater range to better service the population of Western Australia. We are unlikely to lose our drive to get patients into definitive care as fast as we can. For some, it will be the difference between life and death, and for many of the rest, it will mean more rapid diagnosis and better outcomes. And the helicopter service is core to our business of saving lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Much appreciated. And Mr. Sugar, thank you. I'll ask you just to stay there if you don't mind. So can I remind any councillors in a moment questions for the gentleman giving the deputation, but a reminder if any councillors have got questions of the administration in relation to this item 11.1, just hold them until the item is tabled for questions. Councillors, any questions for our guests tonight? Very well done. Thank you very much for being here and thanks for explaining the situation. Much appreciated. So we move to Mandy McAvoy from West Perth Local. I believe was going to speak for officer's recommendation in item 12.1 to please come forward. Was there some change to that?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'm actually going to defer that and make it a question at the ordinary council meeting instead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Mandy, hardworking member of the West Perth Local team, one of our community groups and one of our neighbourhoods. And thank you for the hard work that you're doing in the community, and we'll see you next week. I guess that means. Let's move then to 7, 8, 9 and 10. Items 7 to 10 will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting next week. So we move to reports, and as we move through reports, I'll ask if councillors have any questions in relation to these items. 11, Planning and Economic Development Alliance reports. 11.1 is the initiation of amendment number 47 to the City Planning Scheme number 2 and the amendments number 5 to Local Planning Scheme number 26, Normalised Redevelopment Area. Councillor Leeser has a proximity interest declared. Thank you, Councillor Leeser. You can hold there just for a moment to... are there any questions on this item from any councillors? Councillor Fleeton, you've asked a question. Happy with that? No questions? Councillor Leeser, take a seat. Thank you very much. Item 12.2, 11.2, request to rename Nelson Avenue / Crescent. Which one is it? Is it both? It's both. East Perth to Ceylani Avenue / Crescent, East Perth. Councillor Fleeton, I note 4 questions from your good self. Is there anything further there? Any questions from any of our elected members? Thank you. 11.3. Retail Core Refresh Phase 2, Murray Street. Councillor Lees, you had a question. Thank you. Anyone else, any further questions? Or any questions? Thanks, everyone. 11.4, number 129, lot 97, Barrack Street. Proposed change of use from small bar, entertainment, to adult retail shop, restricted premises, unlisted use, including external and fit-out works and signage. There was a question from you, Councillor Gordon. All good, thank you. And any further questions from any councillors? Yes, Councillor Leeser.
Yes, I was just wondering why this is before council, this matter. Thank you.
CEO.
If we could invite the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development to respond.
Thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor. It comes to council for a decision because it's considered an unlisted use under the scheme and we don't have delegation to deal with those.
Thank you, General Manager. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fleet.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. The CEO might need to take this on notice for next week. When a council's refused something under an unlisted use, what has SAT said is okay to use as a reason to knock it back?
CEO.
If I could ask the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development to respond.
Thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor, an unlisted use basically gives council the discretion to make an assessment as to whether or not the proposal meets the requirements set out in clause 67 of the deemed provisions, and those are that long list of things that need to be taken into account when making a decision. So if council was of a mind to refuse it, it would need to be on the basis of the stuff under clause 67.
Just to follow up on that, do they then go in and critique that in the assessment? Like, so I'm just, what's the weight of the discretion that they give? Is it so we can make a case on, say, 2 of those points in 67, that's the case, or will they say your discretion really shouldn't have been applied so heavily in one area or the other?
General Manager.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I guess they don't apportion a weighting to particular clauses of 67, but what they do require under clause 67 is for you to take into consideration the sections of 67 that actually apply to this development. Because there are that many of them, some of them won't apply at all. So if you were to use the whole list of 67, some of that would be disregarded because they don't relate to the development application.
Thank you. CEO, I've got a question. I just want to be clear on this. So there was a consultation period with local business owners and property owners, I take it. Firstly, can I just clarify the length of period for that consultation? Their consultation generally?
Lord Mayor, I can clarify in the pack the additional information how long it was for, but I do believe that we wrote to the adjoining landowners and businesses.
So wrote to them, and again, only one submission was received. Am I reading that right?
Correct.
Okay. And how many people do we think we might have written to?
I'll confirm that for you, Lord Mayor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any further questions from any councillors? Thanks, everyone. Let's go then to 12, Community Development Alliance reports. 12.1, major events and festival sponsorship, Perth Festival 2023. Just hold on again, Councillor Lisa. Councillor Gordon had a question, and are there any further questions from anyone? Councillor Leeser, take a seat. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. 13, Infrastructure and Operation Alliance reports. There aren't any tonight. 14, Corporate Services Alliance reports. 14.1, Monthly Financial Statements, July 2022. Number of questions received from Councillor Fleet. My understanding is they've been answered. Anything further, Councillor Fleet, or any other questions from councillors? Thank you. Let's go to 14.2, Schedule of Accounts paid July 2022. Ditto. Series of questions from Councillor Fleeton. Anything further from Councillor Fleeton or any other councillors?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor.
Yes.
Question 7 on page 11 of our handout. You can't answer it tonight, but it would be interesting to know for $146,000 for public Wi-Fi, the usage and the locations on it. Future note would be really helpful, please.
So this relates to question 7, to point 7 in the pack. In your answers, yeah, okay. Number 7. CEO?
Yes, we'll undertake that information and provide before the ordinary council meeting.
Anything further from anyone?
A follow-up on 8. So it's 46,000 to HSF, and these are for templates for agreements. So this is not ongoing work, is it? It's a template that our staff can then use.
CEO?
Correct.
Any further questions? 14.3 is major review of Council Policy 2.2, purchasing and associated delegations. Series of questions from Councillor Gordon, Councillor Fleeton. Any follow-up or any further questions from any councillors? Councillor Gordon?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to our staff members who've done a good job of responding to the questions to date. I was just wondering if there's somewhere in the policy that specifically says that purchasing must be done directly to a contractor, and that just to make sure there's no use of intermediaries generally. So obviously that's the intent, is not to contract one party and allow them to go off and do something. Well, with that, we shouldn't be contracting a party with the intent for them to go off and procure through another entity. So is there something that specifically prevents that?
CEO?
We're very pleased to see our Alliance Manager of Procurement here, Richard Watts. So with the Lord Mayor's indulgence, if we could direct all of the questions to Richard, that would be appreciated.
Richard, consider yourself indulged. Thank you.
The actual policy doesn't have anything that specifies that you can't buy through an intermediary, but it's a clear, I suppose, a clear contravention of what we're trying to achieve by being fair and transparent for the market. In the marketplace, there are procurement houses who specialise in being intermediaries. We presently don't use any of those. Even if we were to use those, we would still stick by the procurement policies by obtaining the right number of quotes and also complying with the regulations.
Thank you, Procurement Manager. Any further follow-up to that one, Councillor Gordon, or any others?
I asked a question, excuse me, number 17 on the responses about if we are to approve that variations of 10% just come under delegated authority, and asked a question as to where the transparency will be from that, and I've received a response that this could be reported. In order to receive reporting on that, would we need to move an amendment to the recommendation next week, or can this be done administratively?
So I think the CEO is sending that back to you, the Procurement Manager.
I don't understand the administration around reporting through to council, so I would like to think it could be done administratively, but I'd take guidance from the governor's team.
And CEO, anything you want to add?
Well, I think it could be done as part of an administrative reporting obligation, but if we have any advice to the contrary, we'll bring it back to council.
Okay. Thank you, Procurement Manager. Was there any further questions? Anyone? Yes, Councillor Fleet.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So it's question 1 in the handout, page 12 of 21.
Yeah.
The terminology is expanded within the draft policy. That explanation there as to what inclusivity and equality means is pretty broad. Are we setting ourselves up for someone to come back and use this to say that we need to apply this if they are on the wrong end of a decision, or anything? Like, it's just quite broad, saying we're going to ensure inclusivity and equality by encouraging and proactively supporting equal access to opportunities and resources for people or groups who might otherwise be excluded or marginalised. In procurement, I don't understand that application.
So through the CEO to the Procurement Manager.
Sure. The city has many policies and strategies that deal with these with ancillary I suppose, community style efforts to make sure everyone's included. The wording in the procurement policy simply supports that. I think publicly when we go to tender, everybody is invited to tender, so we automatically open the door to everybody anyway. What we're saying there is we won't specifically exclude anybody from tendering, and the statement was made just in support of the city's other policies.
Just to follow up, please, Lord Mayor, what do you
Yeah.
mean we're not going to exclude someone from, we are going to do that if they can't meet what they're, I mean, we're not going to take Jim's mowing to install lights. I mean, how do we, what I don't want to happen is someone say, you said you were going to open it up to more small businesses or more companies with a balance sheet of under X, and yet we still just keep going to the same old companies. So I appreciate where you're going. It's just that now this is a policy inclusion in the procurement policy. I don't want it to trip us up.
CEO.
So, Councillor, you'll recall that one of our elected members was very keen to see a statement that probably would be even more specific about our desire for accessible and inclusive practices. And at the time, I think Richard Watt's response was, well, we already have much of this already contained in various policies and plans and so on. So it was at, I think, the inclination of an elected member that we did restate a commitment that we are an inclusive organisation. I think if it is what you're looking to is possibly an unintended consequence, if we could maybe take this back and have another look to confirm that what we are actually doing is broadly inviting every person and we're not deliberately precluding, and if the statement is in any way confusing and if council are happy to support, we could always remove it, but I'd take advice from the manager on that. Would the manager like to add anything through the Lord Mayor?
Yeah. The policy as it's presently written before the revision already includes statements to that effect, but they're written quite vaguely or generically. So what we tried to do was group them together to show that we are being open to all opportunities for trade and business. So that's where that actually came from.
Thanks. A follow-up. So I believe it was from the Deputy Lord Mayor in a discussion where we wanted to have like a buy local aspect of it, right? So I know we can't say if you have a business within the City of Perth, we'll give you a 10% weighting to a procurement process. I know we can't say that. I'm just worried that we've gone, so ensuring inclusivity and equality is just impossible. So I don't know how we can structure it better, but right now I don't think it meets what we were trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Good.
Sorry, I did have another question. Number 10 on the answer pack regarding how all of our officers basically have the ability to sign a contract, and the manager has pointed out that that's in keeping with current practice. However, I'd like to see that at least phased out in future. So obviously quite a drastic change this time. So can we do anything now to foreshadow that at a later date we'd like to see that threshold lifted so no one below, say, a manager level is signing contracts?
Is CEO sending that one through to the procurement manager?
It requires a much larger discussion because it's a fundamental authorisation from the council down through to the CEO. So I haven't been here long enough to take the temperature of the business to see where it sits in relation to wanting to do that. I suspect it's actually got some future value, which I suggested in the response. It would take a little bit more work, and it might require some tweaks to a few different elements, which talk about the financial authorities, the delegations, having separate, I suppose, separate tables for invoice payments versus contract signings, things like that. So there's a few different elements that go together that will take a larger piece of work. I think what we've done here is taken a step towards that. When this is bedded in, then it would be much easier for us to add in that second layer to it as we mature through that.
Thank you, Procurement Manager. Any further questions from the two councillors or any other councillors?
Sorry, one for on number 2 on page 12.
This is of the answer.
Of the
pack.
answers, sorry. Yep, the answer pack. So it's about the long-term financial plan being included and the word or. So am I right in saying my concerns around the discretionary funding, just because it's in the long-term financial plan, that doesn't just hand over the ability to spend that pot of money.
Richard.
The intent for this was born from, we had quite a few issues with people wanting to award multi-year contracts, but there was they weren't funded by any multi-year pot of money. So through discussions with the CFO, he suggested that as long as it's either in the currently approved budget or in the long-term financial plan, then that would be enough for us to award a multi-year contract to a supplier. Because as you know, once you've made a contract commitment, it needs to be funded, otherwise you're in breach. I think the concept here, though, is that it has to be in the long-term financial plan, but whatever the project or activity is, it needs to be underpinned by a real operational need, a development plan, a strategy. There is other documentation that determines whether or not it should go ahead. So one of the first questions we ask when it comes to procurement is, what do you want? Why is it? How is this funded? And that funding is approved by the strategic finance accountant and or their line managers. We don't move forward if that's not proven, because we can't make a commitment to a supplier if we don't have the funding for the contract.
Excellent explanation. I'm just worried in 25-26, there's discretionary funding that kicks in of about 2.6 million a year. We haven't allocated that ourselves yet. Does that then turn around and say to the city, we'll just take it from there because it's in the long-term financial plan, an unearmarked bucket of money?
No, ultimately what happens, if it's not presently funded or if it's not listed in a plan or a strategy, then Michael would say, the CFO would say, I'll have a conversation with the business to see how we can fund this. He might then need to move some funds around. That's up to Michael how he does that in keeping with the city's governance. But no, I wouldn't say it gives us free access to that. There still has to be underlying justification for the expenditure, which is usually approved by any other means that we have.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to 15, the Chief Executive Officer reports. 15.1 is the freedom of entry, the 10th Light Horse Regiment. Councillor Gordon, a couple of questions. Any follow-up required there? Or any other questions from any other councillors? No? Thank you. 16, Audit and Risk Committee report. 16.1 is the Development Approvals Internal Audit Report. No questions with notice. Any other questions from any councillors? Okay, 16.2, New South Wales Compliance Audit Report, New South Wales Annual Compliance Audit Certificate 2022. Councillor Gordon had a question. And any others? Thanks, team. 16.3, Vic Roads Compliance Audit Report, July 2022. Any questions, anyone? 16.4 is Draft Strategic Audit Plan, Financial Year 2022-2023. There was a question there from Councillor Fleeton. Anything further required there?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. So looking at the answer on our handout, page 19, it's pretty clear that the city's given a good account of why it's not required, and we've done what's needed to be done in the inquiry. So I'm trying to reconcile, why does the paper say we should do it, and then your response is, no, we don't need to. Do I need to move the amendment, or can the officer's recommendation for next week just reflect what you've got here?
See ya.
If I could ask the governance manager to advise, please.
You will need to move it as an amendment next week, given the committee recommended as per the officer's recommendation at the meeting.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you. Let's go to item 17, motions of which notice has been given, and they'll be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting next week. Item 18 is matters for which the meeting may be closed. Items 18.1 to 18.5 and attachment 12.1A are designated confidential and in accordance with section 5.23 of the Local Government Act 1995. If any councillors have questions relating to these items, we're going to need to move behind closed doors and pause the live stream. Do we have any questions? Okay, so we will at this point need to do just that. Sorry? I don't think you're allowed to do that, Councillor Gordon. stream and invite anybody outside who wanted to come back inside. Just go, huh? Yeah. Item 19. Item 19 is, welcome back everyone, urgent business, and this item will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting, which means item 20. With no further business, I'll declare the agenda briefing session closed at precisely 5:44 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Could you all please rise for the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of Perth, Mr. Basil Zempler.
Thanks.